Welcome, everybody, to the Genesis Project Podcast. Business principles for beginners from the School of Hard Knocks. They say that success leaves clues. In this podcast, we're going to discover the clues that it leaves behind, and we're going to start at the very beginning. We'll get into the weeds of how the guests of the show came up with their business ideas, the why behind their business ideas, how they dealt with setbacks and failures, what keeps them pushing forward, and the emotions behind it all. Everyone wants to start a business, but many are held back by something that keeps them from starting. We'll learn what it takes to get to the next level of business and beyond, and we're learning together through different principles of people who graduated from the School of Hard Knocks. So, grab you a pen, some paper, and a highlighter to take notes, because class is in session. Class, I want you to welcome a person who I literally just met 5 minutes ago, and it wasn't from a street corner or anything like that. We're actually in the same Facebook group, and we had conversations prior to this, and I was elated when he said he will come to the School of Hard Knocks to teach a lesson. So for that reason, I want you to welcome to the class guest professor J.C. Preston. Say what's up to the class.
What's up, class? How we doing? Glad to be here. It's
Everything is everything.
Fun time.
So I was pretty excited when you said you was going to come to the class, and more specifically because of the type of person that you are, and two, just for whatever reason, you're just the connector of connectors, know, of people, of pretty much everything,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited for you to get into this class, which I'm going to dub the networking class.
Okay.
And for my IT geeks out there, I'm not speaking of, hooking up computers or servers or anything like that.
Which we could get into that if you wanted to, as that, my bachelor's was in electrical engineering. So
yeah. I might have you come back on the show, and we might
right. Yeah.
But just real quick, I want you to give just a quick background and just kind of let people know who you are, what you do, and all that type of good stuff.
Right. So again, thank you for having me on the show. Definitely a pleasure. And I should probably do this more often, as I've been a podcaster for nearly 20 or not 20, but nearly 200 episodes myself. About to actually just put out session 175 this upcoming week with a guy by the name of Greg Reed, who wrote a book, and amongst being involved with hundreds of books, 3 Feet from Gold. Right. But my story actually starts like most other people do these days, going to college because that was the thing to do. Good grades through high school and all before that, and make sure that you got into a good school. And so went there and did what I was supposed to do there. It took me a while, but as I was going through that process, I realized I don't want to necessarily make this my career choice, because up until that point, I always kind of thought, my mom had been a teacher. And so I was thinking, what's better than being a teacher? A professor. So, and so let's be a professor and get those awesome long summers, and, get to teach and about something you're passionate about. And, it sounded like a great life. And as I got into grad school to go down that path, I realized there's a lot of politics that direction. And B, becoming an actual tenured professor is about as likely as being struck by lightning. So I'm like, well, I'm probably just going to get my master's and get out. And I should probably say that up until that point, I really didn't care how long it was going to take me, because again, I was going to be a professor. That was like my goal.
Yeah.
And so I think, I don't know, when it came down to it, it was probably in my undergrad for six and a half years. August of 2006 was when I got my undergrad. And then, I got out with my master's in 2009. So 9.5 years at Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
I do not recommend that to anybody. Get honestly, what I would recommend if you are going to go to college, go to the junior college, get your credits there that you can, and then if you're going for the right reasons to Purdue, which isn't completely, or not Purdue, but college for the right reasons, then yeah, that's another topic altogether. But anyway, so yeah, I got out of school there, and as I was getting the very polite show to the door kind of movement by the universe,
Right.
what a couple of my professors actually said, hey, for one, based on what we can tell, you're kind of an outlier. You're not going to necessarily fit in your typical 9 to 5 as well. So you might need to make your own way through life. And I'm like, what the heck does that mean? Well, it basically meant that he's like, you need to become a consultant, A, or B, become an entrepreneur. And so for the last 10 years, I've been in various startups, own almost a handful of businesses, or part owner of a handful of businesses. I have been running, again, my own podcast since 2015. And yeah, just doing all the above, I guess, since then. So, yep.
Man, when you mentioned, I've heard a couple of episodes of your podcast, and when I say it's amazing, it's amazing. I'm not too sure if I'm the right person to be saying that, but it's amazing. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you for saying that, for sure. Yeah, it's and if you go back to the early sessions, man, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. Heck, I wasn't using this mic by any means. I was using the headset for my freaking gaming console, which is somewhere in this office.
Yeah.
And the thing is that you start, just like anything in life, you learn along the way. And now I'm probably more than an audiophile than most podcasters are. That's for sure.
No, I hear that. I definitely hear that.
So
the way I like to kind of kick this class off is by having you tell the class a Genesis moment that you've had. And for those of you who are new to the School of Hard Knocks, into the Genesis Project podcast, the Genesis moment is when you are at that fork in the road and you see both paths and you see what life could be if you was to take that path. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, that is a Genesis moment, those beginning steps. So an example would be, a Genesis moment for me would be starting this podcast. Starting the School of Hard Knocks is a Genesis moment. Me getting married is a Genesis moment. So why don't you tell the class a Genesis moment?
Well, I think I briefly kind of skipped over part of that, but really, towards the end of my undergrad years, I was doing, again, what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
As you're thinking about getting a job, or continuing on the path that I did, I was like, okay, internships, right? Internships.
Right.
Every one of them I got fired from. I swear, like every job that I've ever had, I've either been downsized or laid off or fired. And
now,
it's
was it because of something you did, or just they just wasn't feeling you, or what?
It's just well, for the only job that I never really got, I kind of laid myself off because I graduated. Well, and that, I guess if you count being a graduate instructor, that was kind of the same thing there. But all my internships, I did not get along well with the person that was above me, for the most part. It's just like, and some of that was because I was young and inexperienced, I'm sure, at this point. But
Yeah.
The other part, though, is that they didn't really know how to lead properly. And they led through fear more so than actually being a person of service. Like you never really saw them doing things that they expected you to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just, when people are trying to show that kind of power without, they talk, but they talk to talk, but they don't walk the walk. I just didn't really have any interest in being there any longer. So,
Yeah.
um, and so, yeah, no, that's just the thing is that, I've realized since then that I'm very transparent, very, what's the term? Authentic, that's
Yeah.
one of the terms that is popular these days. But, the thing is that as you find out who you are, right? And if you stick to that, then the universe rewards that with bigger and better opportunities.
Right. Right. That's awesome because I just had a conversation with a cousin-in-law, and we was talking about uh more so just, well, in layman's terms, just the law of attraction, and
Mm,
how that plays a huge part, and how that's not really, I don't know, for me, for my generation, I've seen people who are definitely on top of that law. But for this new generation, not so much so. Yeah.
right.
I don't think they fully understand that. But at some point, I would like to visit that and try to really dig into it.
So when you say your generation, when were you born?
I was born in '83, so
83.
I
So
guess you could
you're
say
the
the '80s
very,
baby.
no, you're in the very tail end of what I like to call ourselves the Xennial period.
Yeah, yeah,
We're the generation that had to grow up with things like, we see an advertisement on TV and it's like, send your money and, a envelope to this address.
yeah,
And then 4 6 weeks later, you'll get whatever you ordered.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Whereas today it's like you hop on Amazon, you can get something as quick as when we're in normal time, so to speak, and get something as quick as tomorrow.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And it's nice, but it's like, man, things have changed quite a bit just in our lifetime. And I think that's the difference between, again, us Xennials and the millennials, and especially the um the Gen Zers for sure.
Mhm, mhm. So let me ask you this. Uh, I know I know you hold a few positions. I
Hmm.
want you to talk about that because I think there's some burning questions that I really wanted to ask, but I don't think I would do it any justice until you kind of explain what your roles are, your current role.
Right. So, um the thing is that as you, I guess the best way to describe it is that I'm at this point kind of like a professional freelancer. just
Okay.
like a free just like a freelancer can do any job that they want to, but they're kind of seeing it as more of an employee position, one of very little power.
Mhm.
I like to kind of look for those positions where I give a lot of value first, and then
Mhm.
I get rewarded in the long term, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Okay.
Like my
Okay.
view is always like, what can I do now to give value now, to give, just be in on the foundation so that when this awesome thing grows based on the team that's around me, I'll eventually get my due reward, so to speak.
Right.
A
Right.
lot of people, they go into, even with sales, for example, they'll, as one of my recent guests said, they'll go into the sales as seeing the other person as a dollar sign. They don't go
Mhm.
into the conversation seeing the person as another person that they could potentially actually help.
Mhm.
It's a big problem, but you don't know what to help someone on unless you actually sit down and talk to them and find out what they need help with,
Right.
which again, a lot of people don't do these days. So.
Yes, because of cell phones and social media, but that's another rant that I should probably not get on.
Cheers. No, I get you there.
So I know one of the things, one of the roles that you hold is being a technology consultant.
Yep.
As a technology consultant, I want you to describe or just talk about some of the services you offer as a technology consultant.
So more specifically as a solopreneur technology consultant,
Love it.
right?
Okay.
More so along the lines of, if someone's really wanting to start something up, what are the systems that they're going to need to have in place to not only make sure that some of the things are taken care of, but they just come across as being a quality person that doesn't have too many of things spinning in
Right.
around them, right?
Right.
And that they don't look like they can do anything.
Right.
So yeah, I mean the main thing, and I guess what I truly help people do is scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you do that? Well, for example, there's plenty of ways to take care of when you're building a relationship with someone for the first time, actually engaging with someone first, and then, going through the meet and greet period. Um, and then, if there's something you guys can do together,
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. And then, how do you automate each one of those parts? So that's just your traditional sales path, let alone, how do you, create an audience? Well, that's something is a completely different path, because one of the things that what I've heard from actually Greg Reed in one of his other books, he was talking about the fact that someone said that, because he writes a lot of his books like Napoleon Hill did. So
Mm-hmm.
someone said that if you're trying to go for popularity and profit at the same time as a solopreneur, you're only going to get one.
Mm.
And if you're trying to do both, then good luck.
Right.
So for me, I'm more about, how can I build strategic relationships with people so that I can get profit?
Mm-hmm.
So audience building, not so much in my forte. And there's
Right.
a lot of influencers out there that can tell you how to do it like they've done it, but do they actually have the money?
Right. Right.
There was actually a time, I think it was actually Seth Rogen, he's the one with the big podcast, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
There
he's
was there
on what, UFC?
Yeah. So there was actually a point, I'm pretty sure that this is the right name, and again, this is a conversation that I had in the podcast, that the guest was talking about the fact that they had actually gone to an event where Seth Rogen was a speaker, and he actually said, even with his crazy popular show, that he was finding it hard to pay for the overhead of his staff.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't think that, but
Oh.
again, it's, how is he actually monetizing his show,
Right.
right?
Right.
And what else does he have out there that's actually, Seth Rogen, his name's on it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it
Mm-hmm.
kind of makes sense that if you don't have those other systems in place that actually take care of your money issue, that, you might be popular, but you might not necessarily be making a profit. So
Right. Right. And just for that brings some clarity into the deal that Joe Rogan had just signed with Spotify for his to have his podcast on Spotify. So that kind of sheds some light on that.
mm-hmm.
That's interesting. One of the things that you mentioned was systems.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from a tech background, I always find it more, I wouldn't say interesting, just more useful and helpful when somebody else talk about systems in the sense of making things work easier, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's say for a new person who just started a business yesterday, what are some basic systems that they should probably start right now?
Well, let's take it ones to a lot of people are probably familiar with. Okay.
Okay.
Everybody has seen The Founder, I'm sure,
Yeah.
or a lot of people have seen The Founder, right?
Yeah.
If you're starting a restaurant, right? You might have, if you have the greatest, like, menu, the best food, all that sort of stuff, that's great. And it's going to, if you can bring, again, this is you bringing value to the table, literally. But, the thing is that if you can, set up your own shop, and then you have all your own ways of doing things, and, eventually put in the time that over some years you'll actually make it, then that's great. But most people, right? Honestly, if I was to be the one that wants to pull in, money from a restaurant, I would personally opt to go become a McDonald's franchise.
Mm-hmm.
If I had the 100 million, or not the 100 million, the million to put into going to Chicago and going to what is it, Burger University,
Mm-hmm.
and then they tell me exactly what to do and how to do everything and all these different things, then I'm going to go that path, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to follow the footsteps of people that have been there, have done that. And that's one of the biggest things that I think that anybody can take, is that if there are systems that other people put into place, there are reasons why those systems are there.
Right.
And it's better to follow them than create everything from scratch yourself. Now, going back to answering your question, what kind of systems can you have in place? Now, if you're going back to McDonald's, okay, the menu is always going to be in the same place. There's always going to be a way of making a Big Mac. There's always going to be a way of making McFlurry, all these sort of things. The drive-through is usually going to go the same way, right?
Right.
Each restaurant's going to have now 2 drive-throughs, or 2 menus that you can order from. So those are all systems. As far as, if you're just a consultant or a coach, for example, you'd probably want to use a product by one of my most recent guests. His name is Devin Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And that it literally is, you're going to have this certain process where you're engaging with people for the first time. Well, wouldn't it make sense that the part that you find yourself copy and pasting to when you're engaging with people, more or less, wouldn't it make sense to let a computer do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's actually created a platform which we use in our businesses to, blow up your business, as opposed to you having to do those mundane parts and then getting to the part where you actually are adding value in the discovery session, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So you're saying that having instead of blazing a new path or a new trail, it's just a whole lot easier for you to find somebody's whose systems are working currently and just duplicate that system.
Right. Yep.
Hmm. I, I I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you answered that the way that you did, because I feel that just from some of the people that I've spoken with, whether they are in the class or out of the class, they don't particularly understand what a system is. And just from using the example of McDonald's, there's a certain way for you to, there's a certain way that McDonald's cook their fries. There's a certain way that McDonald's cook their Big Macs. You don't want to start up a Burger King and use McDonald's
Right.
system,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Or you don't want to start your own. You go to Burger U, you
Yeah,
get your approval and everything, and then you go back to your franchise and start making the McBob.
yeah, right, right.
What is that?
Because nobody knows what McBob is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Exactly.
that's amazing. I'm so glad you brought that up. So that means uh, when I am ready to release this episode, I'm going to shoot this episode to that person or persons that I was talking to who just couldn't understand what a system is.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, one of the systems that I just recently started implementing is a system that I use for social media, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way that I post on social media, exactly what I post on social media, and all that type of stuff.
When you
It-
show some, when you post on social media,
yep.
how many
Mhm.
times a day that you post on social media?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, you and I, we're both in the same Facebook group. And one of the things that I do is, because I'm in, for example, I'm not going to give out the real number, but let's just say I'm being 4 Facebook groups besides my personal, page and what have you. What I do is I post to my personal page, I post to the show page, and then I post in those 4 groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had to create a system where, for me to do something like that might take, a couple hours to create it and then post it everywhere. I had to create a system where, one, it would be efficient, and two, it would get done,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So just a means of shaving those few hours down to at least an hour, or maybe just 30 minutes, right? And obviously, I don't know if too many people know this, but using a social media management tool, like for instance, Woofy or Hello Woofy or Buffer, Hootsuite, what have you, like that,
Right.
right?
Yep. Yep.
And originally, like I said, it would take me at least a few hours to put everything together and then start posting it everywhere. And now that I've cut that time down to maybe half, my wife is in love with me again, because now that's more time I can spend with her, right? And
Right.
as you can tell, that was probably that was one of the one of the major drawbacks of me spending so much time on the School of Hard Knocks, but finding a way to shorten everything so that I can have more time to do what I want to do, spend time with the wife and make her happy, as well as give out good quality and humongous value when it comes to the School of Hard Knocks and the Genesis Project podcast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And the thing is that, and you can start a whole nother conversation of, as you're building your systems, make sure that you write them down so that, you get to the size that when you can bring on a VA, I'm not saying
yep,
an employee, you can bring on a VA that they can do exactly what it is that you do, so that they become an extension of your system, and not that they're bringing their own little flavor into
yeah,
how things are done. Otherwise, or it might not work.
right,
So,
right. That's an awesome gem. Uh, One, the fact that you said bringing in the VA. Two, the fact that you mentioned creating a process or jotting down exactly what you do step by step to give to your VA or whatever employee you decide to bring on, so that they'll be able to replicate what you did, how you did it, and things of that nature. I
right.
think that's something that's missed by a lot of people, and more so just people who are starting off with new businesses and not knowing exactly uh, what to do when it comes to business. I think that's very, very key right there.
Right.
So with that being said, I, I I want you to talk about how you specifically became the connector, or the networking piece. I guess, where I'm from, we call you the plug because you got the plug on just about everything.
Well, that, or you can call yourself the lynchpin,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which isn't necessarily to be confused with, certain high level bosses in the mafia by any mean.
Right.
But no, the thing is that I've always, so as I was going through the early years of new Inceptions, I was actually like, how am I going to differentiate this from the other entrepreneurial uh, resources that are out there?
Hmm.
And what I realized is, I am the type of individual who sees other people as individuals, not just other people, right?
Right. Right.
And so one of my big flavors of the site has always been how to find your own personal freedom, whatever that happens to be.
Mhm.
Right. And as you're becoming an entrepreneur, it's smart to always refer back to books and concepts that you've learned about in the past. One of which is the whole Four Quadrants by Robert Kiyosaki.
Love that book.
Now, one of the things that you gotta realize is that 90% of the population that's out in there, they're all E quadrant people.
Right.
Another 5%, out of the 10% that actually learn how to be their own boss, so to speak, five of that, half of that, so 5% total ends up in the self-employed world. The other
Mhm.
5% is I quadrant, B quadrant. Those are
Mhm.
the people that know the passive income world.
Mhm.
The problem that a lot of people do is that they don't consider when they're starting their business where the revenue is coming from. Is the revenue coming from a system that they're setting up, which will get you into passive income
Right.
potentially, or does the business is it require you to actually do the service or make the product or something like that?
Mhm.
So if you have that as a fundamental underlying concept when you're starting your business, then you're going to be able to actually take it to where you want to go with it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
um Rehash on the question. I'm sorry, I kind of got lost in thought there.
No, it's okay. The question was, how
How do
did
I
you?
become the connector? Okay,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so as I'm going down this path of realizing, okay, I want to do, passive income. I want to be the next Pat Flynn. I want to be the next Gary V or blah, blah, blah. How do all these guys make it? Okay. So got the podcast, got the blog, got all these different, things going on. Didn't do a YouTube series because frankly, I don't have the uploading capacity to be able to throw video up on,
Mhm.
online all the time. But, the thing is that, as I was going down that path, I realized the way for me to separate myself was to focus not so much on what they focused, not necessarily the tools, not necessarily all the grand ideas, but more so of how do we get personal freedom? Okay.
Mhm.
Well, the way that you get personal freedom is to realize, again, going back to something we touched on earlier, is who are you? What
Right.
makes you you? And so one of the things that is out there is a Japanese model called the Ikigai, right?
Mhm.
And if you're familiar with the Ikigai, it basically gets broken down into what I call the three P's and an extra P. And so you have your purpose, you have your own particular process. Of course, you have that whole passion, which is most people think is the only thing you have to follow, which it's
Right.
definitely not.
Right.
Then you have the profit part, right? But you need to have those first three P's in order before you ever think about going down the profit lane.
Mhm.
Otherwise, if you focus on the profit only, well, that's like basically getting a job for just a steady income, but not liking what you're doing, right?
Right. Right.
So a lot of people do focus on that, which is unfortunate. So then people like, oh, well, I don't want to focus on the money, so maybe I'll just focus on the passion. Like, what is it that I want to do? Well, no, not necessarily, because there might not be a way of monetizing that passion, right?
Mhm.
And so then you got to bring in, the whole purpose aspect, where the purpose is where how do you connect into the world? So if the
Right.
passion is you being interested in certain things in the world, you looking outward, the purpose is how people see you and how the world sees you, how the
Right.
universe, where do you fit in, right?
Right. Right.
And so with that, then you have the process, which actually another one of my past guests, he actually agreed with all of this in the conversation. He calls it your profession. So I call it the process. He calls it the profession. And you got to figure out what is it that makes whatever it is that you do different than how other people do it,
Right.
right?
Right.
So if you get those three things in place, then you can make the profit.
Right.
Then you're making a profit, money on something that you actually like to do.
Right.
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 So once I realized that, I'm like, okay, what is it that I've always naturally done that other people see me as being a good person of doing, and I've always been able to make good on it?
Mm-hmm.
Connecting, honestly. It's just like, I remember even when I was like all the way like 5 years old, there used to be this Disney Channel like Dumbo Circus, right? Like I don't even know if you remember that or not, but it was something super silly. And part of the song in that was that you got to go tell all your friends that Dumbo Circus is on. So what did I do? I ran outside. I knew my neighbors were outside, doing things, riding their bikes and whatever. It's like, guys, Dumbo Circus is on. Dumbo Circus is on. Well, by the time I got them in there, the show was already over. But at that point, I was just like, that was the first sign of me. Here's the idea. Here's the cool thing. You want to share it with other people and, bring them into it. And that's the same concept that, I kind of roll on with even today. It's like, here are these good, as entrepreneurs, here are these awesome systems that are in place, or here are these awesome people that are in place. And how, when I do discovery sessions with people, how can I connect them to the right kinds of people and the right systems to get them further along on their own business?
Right. Right. Just to backtrack real quick, you mentioned the four quadrants, and I wanted to shed some light on that because there might be some people in a classroom who don't know what the four quadrants is. The
Mm-hmm.
four quadrants, like you said, was a book that was written by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and a few other awesome books that he wrote. The four quadrants is there's the B, the I, the E, and I believe the S,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
The I is for investor, which is something that a lot of people strive for. And then there's the B, which is business owner. There's the E, which stands for employee, and S stands for self-employed.
Mm-hmm.
And what the quadrant is uh, like you look at it like a plus sign. Each one of those boxes is a letter, and we start off at E as the employee, and we have to work our way around the quadrant to become a investor. And
Right.
obviously someone who has who exchanges, well, I wouldn't say money for time, but they have money to give and invest for them to make more money back and things of that nature.
So something, the way that I would break it down even more than that, which I appreciate all the way that Robert's all about financial literacy, and
Yeah.
just, if you want to make money in the world, if you want to really like have somewhat of a, I wouldn't say a 30,000 foot view, but definitely something that's not so super detailed that you're like, oh, I got to do it exactly like how he's doing it. He
Right.
gives you a bit of a flavor of like kind of describing this particular world. Now, as you were saying, there's all these other books that are out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, those get a little bit more specific. Like he was just talking about in an interview with Lewis Howes that, you know, uh, you can actually make, if you understand the tax code, you can actually become wealthy by doing things that are the government favors when it comes to taxes.
Mm.
Right? I'm like,
Interesting.
what? I'm like, what?
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So, That's just, it's just like, wow. So, I mean, there's just different ways. Of course, there's real estate, which is in the I quadrant, but
Right.
there's all these different things. But the way that I would, for most people, is that the I quadrant is money making money, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have money, you can put it into any asset and it would make more money for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then a B quadrant is more necessarily money making money, but it's how do you leverage your network, your net worth, as they
Right.
say sometimes.
Right.
How do you leverage your network to make money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, that one just blows over their head, and that's why they're stuck in the S quadrant.
That is amazing. Again, that's something. If that's one of my favorite books, one of my many favorite books. And of course, class, I will tell you to go get it, and I have to make sure I'll put a reference to that book in the show notes. But
Mm-hmm.
one other thing that I wanted to ask you was, being that we're currently going through this horrific pandemic, I was wondering what is some of the things that you tend to offer as advice to your clients as far as pivoting? Like
The
when,
pandemic pivot. Yeah, go
yes,
ahead.
how do you shift or pivot in this crazy pandemic that we're in?
Well, it's funny. So that's actually kind of the discussion that a lot of my recent guests have been having on the show since the pandemic hit. It's like, how are you pivoting? How are you showing others to pivot?
Right.
And the thing that I've been thinking about, as I've also been listening to Robert Kiyosaki a little bit more, because he's been making these rounds on the podcast,
Yeah.
is the fact that, funny enough, when it comes to the wealthy and those who know how to use money, they know how to use recessions to actually change their business and or capitalize so that when the economy gets back up to speed, they come out wealthier on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, one of the recent podcast guests that we had was Chris Tuff. Chris Tuff is the millennial whisperer. He's
Right.
known for going into different organizations and saying, hey, these are the things that you need to know about millennials that are completely different than the generations before them, and that they care about this, 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 and this. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're not letting them do this, 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 and this, then they're going to be pretty upset and probably leave your company. You won't
Yeah.
be able to retain them.
Yeah.
Whereas the other people, that might work for them, but not this group of individuals. Well, here's the thing: is that during a recession right now, everybody's kept at home doing Zooms, all this
Mm-hmm.
popular stuff, which is amazing. That a couple years from now, we're going to be like, remember the days before the pandemic where we actually drove all this time and flew to meetings all the time and blah blah blah, and now we just do everything online through Zoom, Facebook
Yeah.
room, all these
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah.
And the thing is that you kind of have to see what are the things that you can do. So in that conversation, Chris talks about the fact that he has friends all over the Atlanta area, all over the country, really. But one of the friends that he has is the owner of a pizza restaurant. And
Mm-hmm.
when people are in again, going back to the restaurant idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody can relate to restaurants because we've all been there and we all get the basic gist of how they run.
Right.
So what is he going to do to here's a traditional business that the only way that they usually get money is by people coming in, right? Foot
Mm-hmm.
traffic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, interestingly enough, Atlanta happens to be one of the places where a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows, and all these things are filmed, right?
Right.
Because they have tax benefits for actually doing the filming there.
Right.
One of the shows that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with is The Walking Dead, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was all filmed in Georgia, and that's why you always see that little peach at the end of the
Yep.
thing. That's how you know it was filmed in Georgia.
Right.
Well, anyway, this particular restaurant is one of those restaurants that people, when they want a certain kind of pizza, will go to get that particular kind. And knowing that, it's like, if we could figure out a way to get the pizza to the people that have been, all the celebrities and everybody that's been in here over the years, then we could keep this business going.
Right.
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 Well, that's what they did. They figured out a way of essentially dry freezing their pizzas so that they could send it across country to California. And now a dude that was only making a couple thousand or so per week is now making 6 figures, doing crazy volume.
Insane.
Basically doing the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That is insane.
And see, that's kind of the same thing that we've had to do with our business, is that we've gone from, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the entire sports world has been killed by this thing, and that includes endurance races. So I've been actually a partial owner of a endurance-based company that we produce triathlons,
Mm-hmm.
road races, which are 5Ks, 10Ks, 15Ks, and trail runs, right? And all those require large amounts of people getting together and running. Well, there again, that's shot. So,
Yeah.
we've been able to pivot that, and by doing things virtually, right? And then people posting on social media like, oh, I did my such and such distance with this time, and I'm glad to be, have the merit of saying that I did this. But it's not the same as being in there in person. So of course,
Yeah.
when we can, we'll have the live events again. But this year in particular, we're going to have to do virtual events all year long for our Viking Dash series.
Right. Right.
Well, that's only going to be able to fill the coffers so much, right? So what have we decided? Well, we also, as we're going through this last 10 years of the business, we realized that we've been doing consulting on the side in one respect or another.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, how do we make that the tip of the spear? Not so much the events, but how do we make the consulting the tip of the spear, so that eventually when the world is back to normal, quote unquote, we have events that not only have a lot of people, but can financially take care of themselves, right?
Right.
Being
Right.
sustainable. And so we're like, okay, we got to go into the consulting world. So the consulting world is where we've been really spending our time since mid-March. And funny enough, as we were telling people that that's the direction we were going, one of my early guests on the show, Mark Nathan, reconnected us with his co-author who wrote The Delusion of Passion, David Anderson. And that Dave happens to be highly connected in the government, because he had a background in being an Obama aide back in the day. And so he finds himself like, oh, I know some people that are running PPE. Like, how much PPE? Being personal protection equipment.
Right. Right.
Like a lot, like truckloads. Okay, so okay, let's put that on our platter. How do we even deal with that? How do we even, make sure that, because it's just a completely different world. But as we've been focusing on that, we're now in talks with a local credit union here in Indiana that is connected to 150 other credit unions. So if we help them come up with their protocol for getting reopening, which they're going to have to do June 1st,
right.
they figure out their protocol. They figure out how they're going to test their people over the next month or, couple months or whatever. They're going to pass that information on to their other 150, right? Here's taking advantage of a system.
Yeah.
That's already there.
Yeah.
So we're going to get, the plan is to be able to get that first one, and then it branches out to all, working with all those other ones across the Midwest.
Right. Man, so you take care of one domino that's eventually going to knock down other dominoes, and
Exactly.
that's the way you're kind of putting out there to your clients as far as pivoting and things of that nature. That's actually pretty unique, a pretty unique strategy. Well, let me say this. I know that your time is valuable, so let me ask you this one last question. What is something personal that you want the class to know about you that cannot be found on Google or Wikipedia?
Because I've been focused on the whole profit world as being popular. There's a lot that's not out there, but I think the main thing about me is that I really try to add a lot of value to the discovery sessions that I have with people. In fact, I just joined a Slack group that within 10, 15 minutes, I already created my own channel. It's just like, I noticed that you guys didn't have a podcasting channel on, this place, which is all about, again, this subject of doing your own business. And as soon as I put that up there, post, all these different things, all these, and I'm like, I barely even know how to use Thread I barely know how to use Slack at the level that these guys know how to use it. And I'm just like, well, as soon as I figure out how to use this technology a little bit better, I'll be sure to follow the rules a little bit better. But right now, I'm just trying to add value. So anyway, after the conversation here, I'm going to try to go back up through that and clean some of my responses up and put them back into threads that they're supposed to be and all this fun stuff. So,
yep. One of the things that I've enjoyed about this lesson is that it's hard for you to sort of gather from a website or what have you, how much value you actually put into people. And the fact that you lead with people first and everything else second is amazing. So I personally want to say kudos to you for actually doing that, actually caring about people to the fact where you just want to give people more value, more of you before giving them anything else before the people, looking at people as people themselves.
Right. Well, that's really how, something that Greg Reed says in his Greg says is that, the most successful people in the world are usually the most available as well.
Yeah. So with that being said, I want to give you just a few moments for you to give a shout out to what you're doing, what you got coming up next, where you can be found at your social media, and things of that nature.
Yep. So again, you can find me on the web at newinceptions.com. That's where me and my little band of social misfits where we hang out. And from there, you can always connect with me on Facebook or LinkedIn is usually the best way.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm horrible with the whole posting on a regular. I had a system in place, and I found that when I focused less on promoting myself and actually working with people, that I got more money.
Right.
So,
right.
It's if you watch Gary Vee's videos and you take in the context of what he's actually doing and sitting down and having one-on-one conversations with people,
mm-hmm.
he still does that quite regularly.
Mm-hmm.
It's his team that takes care of his popularity.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the secret on that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, new Inceptions pretty much everywhere except for on Instagram, which again, I'm sorry, I don't post on there as nearly as much as I used to. New.Inceptions, and the podcast is called Angles of a Latitude with 2 T's, because you can't have latitude without having attitude. And
sure enough.
And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, from the School of Hard Knocks, I thank you, Professor, for coming out to the show and sharing with us this lesson that I feel is duly needed and definitely needs to be heard. With that, class, the way I always do this is that, for whatever you going after, whatever you chasing after, you chase after it with violent action. So with that being said, class has concluded, and I will see you guys in the next one. About 15 years ago, I hated where I was at, and I knew that I was meant for more. Greatness. I wanted to start a business, and I asked my friends and family, how do I start a business? 90% of them never started a business before, and the 10% that didn't remember what they did. So I went on and earned my bumps and bruises from the School of Hard Knocks. My inspiration for the School of Hard Knocks and the courses that I've created was to reach people that felt the same way that I felt way back when. Like I was destined for more. The purpose of the Genesis Project podcast was to move those same people towards that greatness with the guest professors that comes to the show and learn from their mistakes. This is a call to action to those who are searching for greatness. Join the School of Hard Knocks by commenting, sharing, subscribing, and get this message out to those searching for greatness. Click on the links in the description to get more information. And everything you do, everything that you chase after it with violent action. I'll see you in the hallway.